In this very special episode, not only because I'm recording and will be uploading on the 25th of December, but also because the featured film is not in fact a featured film, but a television program, with the action taking place in a single day, with the scene being a small town covered in snow, with snow falling all the time, and with the focus on a bunch of 6-year-old kids, a dog, and a rather unusual Christmas tree. These stories and more from the 22nd row. A Charlie Brown Christmas was first aired in December of 1965 on broadcast television, and I watched that very first broadcast as a just-turned 10-year-old, and I'm happy to say that that 25-minute cartoon has stayed with me ever since. So why did I choose a TV program over a movie? Well, there are hundreds if not thousands of movies made about the Christmas season, and I wanted to select a film that really spoke to what I thought about the Christmas season and how much of my childhood is reflected in that film. So I've seen my share of these hundreds, not thousands, but hundreds of these films, and there are some moments in these films I like very much. There are Christmas films where there's tremendous tragedy and sadness and suffering throughout the film, which is redeemed in the last 5 minutes. There are films of wholesome families that have their internal troubles, whether financial or family problems, that get resolved by Christmas Day. There are angels that come and go from everywhere, and thus those films fall into the category of Christmas fantasies. They're all fun to watch, the ones I've watched. I like them all, but none of them really spoke to my warm, fuzzy feelings of childhood in this season of Christmas, except one show. And that show was A Charlie Brown Christmas. And so for me, to honor or to celebrate this season, I have to go with A Charlie Brown Christmas. One of the reasons is that in this sweet old country where I come from, we have 4 seasons. And I like all 4 seasons, but I like Christmas the best, or the winter season. And not only do I like winter and the Christmas season the best, December is also my favorite month of the year. So again, being from this sweet old country where I come from, I like snow. I like cold weather. I like being outside. I like the freshness of the air in the winter. My generation, we got dressed for the cold weather and we went outside. Now, not everybody who has 4 seasons in where they live, they think that we say, or I say, oh, you like being cold. Well, the answer is no, I don't like being cold, but I like cold weather. And what you do as a child or an adult, you just dress for it. The clothes of winter are fun. When I was a kid, we had these almost like jumpsuits, but they were suits that started at your ankles and went up to your neck, and there was a zipper that you would pull up from your waist up to your neck, and they were baggy. They were made of, I don't know what kind of material, but they squeaked when you walked because the very baggy, and so there was no space between your legs, so when you walked it would make a squeaking noise. You would be done up pretty tightly, then you would have your boots on, then you would have your scarf, you would have a cap or a toque, you would have gloves or more often mittens. You would be completely accessorized for the weather. And what I like about A Charlie Brown Christmas is that this same kind of attire is addressed in the cartoon. So, as I said, I was of a generation where we were outside. The parents didn't throw us out the door. We went out willingly. If it was on the weekend, we'd be out all day. If it was during the school in December, after school, we would be out and dressed properly and just doing what we had to do, having fun. So that's the Christmas season, that's the winter season, but why December? I like December because traditionally or typically the first snowfall would be in December. Now yes, there would be snowfalls in late November, But there would never be a December without some kind of snow. But again, for my childhood memories, let's say that December meant the first snowfall. So the first week of December would mean a snowfall. And that signaled that we are in this magical month. Once the snow fell, and let's say it stayed on the ground, and even again, childhood memories can be faulty because we might think of, well, once the snow fell in the first week of December, it stayed all the way through till the end of February or even the middle of March. I'm sure was then just like it is today. We have dry months, we have months where the snow falls and disappears and comes back. But the memory of it as a child is that once the snow was there, it was there all the way through. So we have snow on the ground. The next indicator that we are in the magic month of December is all of a sudden the lights would appear on the houses. Now these would be strings of lights, not white. White Christmas lights appeared much, much later. When I was a kid, the lights would be red, green, blue, and yellow. And they would be stringed lights, and they would go across the eaves trough, or if you had a porch, they would be on the railing of the porch. And if you had a tree in your yard, not necessarily a big one, but some kind of a tree that you could string lights on, then those lights would be strung on the tree. So this also was magical, because now all of a sudden, instead of it just being dark out, and as the days got shorter in November and there was no snow and it was just dark pretty quickly, now when it got dark, you could go outside after school, be out till 6 o'clock, between 4 and 6 o'clock, let's say, and it would be lit. There would be lights everywhere. Every house in our neighborhood would have Christmas lights. Some would have more than others, but everybody had some kind of Christmas lights. And if there was snow, there would be mounds of snow. The sidewalks would be plowed, the streets would be plowed, the driveways would be shoveled, and there would just be mounds of snow up to my shoulders and in some cases over my head. Now this led to the misapprehension that when we were younger there was a whole lot more snow than there is today. But I don't necessarily think that's true. The difference is that I was a foot shorter when I was between the ages of 6 and 10, and walking down the driveway where the snow had been piled up on the side of the driveway, it went up to my shoulders or over my head. Now, of course, that same amount of snow doesn't even reach my shoulders. Even our busiest, or even our heaviest snowfalls of the last couple of years, it might have been waist high. But the idea of it being so high was definitely in my mind when I was a kid, and so we had mounds of snow everywhere. We had lights, and all the lights would shine off the snow. So nighttime was magic time, and so you stayed out as long as you could until you had to come in for dinner. You'd play, you'd build the snowman, you'd have snow fights. And sometimes on the weekends, of course, when there was more light, you would go either in a frozen pond, and there were frozen ponds where I lived, but there also were what we called outdoor rinks, and you would skate. And A Charlie Brown Christmas has these scenes, and so it resonates with me watching this, not only as a 10-year-old kid, watching it for the first time, but also today, say, yeah, that's my childhood up there on the screen. So that was the lights of the evening that changed the evening from something dreary in November to something magical in December. And the last thing about that month of December is the energy in the air. Even as a kid, you could feel it. First of all, there were lots of people outdoors. As I said, we were a generation that was outside, but now we're outside because it's winter time. There's snow, there's snowball fights, there's skating, there's building snowmen. But even in the town that I grew up in, it wasn't tiny and it wasn't big, but there was a mall. And if you went to the mall, there was energy in the mall. First of all, there were Christmas carols blaring all the time. All the stores in the mall would be decorated with the lights. There would be at least one, if not more than one, huge Christmas tree that would be fully decorated. And so even going to the mall, there was an energy. Now, yes, there was an energy because people are going out and buying presents for Christmas, but there was just a general hustling and bustling, wonderful expression from a song, hustling and bustling, of people going back and forth, to and fro, yes, buying presents, yes, getting into the spirit of purchasing things for Christmas, but that energy a kid could feel. So whether you're at the mall, whether you're at the frozen pond, whether you're at the outdoor rink, or just walking down the street to school and walking home from school, there's an energy in the air in December that just isn't there any other time of the year. And I loved that energy. And I was, and my memories of it are just, I was outside all the time. And yes, you'd be cold and at one point, and eventually you'd have to come back in. And I always remembered the ritual of coming back into the house. You came into the house, but you didn't leave, let's say you came inside the door and there was a mat in front of you and the coat rack beside you, but you didn't leave because you had to grab the broom. Because these crazy jumpsuits that we wore, and whatever kind of slippery material it was, you had to brush the snow off your clothes. So you came in the door, you didn't take anything off, you grabbed the broom, and you brushed off your boots and you brushed off your pants, because if you were doing your kid thing and playing, you would have been rolling around in the snow or falling in the snow or jumping into snowbanks. And so the snow would not, if the snow didn't fall off you, it wouldn't melt on you because it was cold enough to stay. And so you'd have to sweep all the snow off you before you took off the jumpsuit and the scarf and the hats and the mittens and the gloves. Mittens were more common than gloves for kids. And I remember that like it was yesterday. I remember doing that every single time I came in from outdoors, and my mother would comment on my rosy red cheeks. Every kid would have rosy red cheeks when they came in from outdoors. So that's my Christmas story, why I love December, why I love the winter season, why I love the Christmas season, and why A Charlie Brown Christmas really resonates with me. So thinking about that, and when I watch the cartoon now, I think about a moment when I was a kid. And it wasn't when I was 10 years old. I would have been younger than that, somewhere between 6 and 10. So let's split the difference and say I was 8 years old. And I have this memory of being, let's say, for sake of argument, 8 years old, and the date was Christmas Eve. Now, here I am going through my favorite month, doing all the things that kids do during that month, out in the snow and the lights and such. And of course, every household, at least our household, had a nice big real Christmas tree decorated with lights, with bulbs, and tinsel. We didn't have anything else, but tinsel was a big deal with our tree. So to understand the story, you kind of understand the makeup of our house. I was one child of 6, so we had a big family, and we lived in a semi-detached house that had 4 bedrooms plus a basement. So on the main floor was where the living room was, and the living room out by the front window is where the tree was. Then as you approached the stairs, you had a stairs leading up to 2 bedrooms upstairs, and then that would have been about 10 or 15 steps, and then you'd have about a 10 step or less downstairs to another level that would have 2 more bedrooms and a bathroom, just like upstairs. And then from that lower level, there was another set of stairs leading to the basement. So it was really quite I think, looking back, a very well-designed house. The locus of the whole place was that area where the lower level steps came up and the stairs to the upstairs bedrooms started. So right there, right beside the entrance to the kitchen, was the main point of the main floor. And who stayed there but our cat? Cats like to pick a spot where they can watch everything that's going on, and they have all those things. If you're a cat lover, you know about their protective instincts and their watch-over instincts. Well, we had a silver tabby, and we had this male silver tabby since he was a kitten. I could hold it in my hands when it was a little kitten. But not for long, because this cat, very healthy cat, I guess it was well looked after and well fed. It grew up to be a huge cat. Now, not the enormous cats that you can see on streaming media nowadays. He was just a big, healthy silver tabby. Now, if you know anything about silver tabbies, they have predominantly silver hair, dark silver hair, but they also have darker fur on them in various places, like lines on them, not like a cat in the wild, but it's some. And on their foreheads, they have lines of dark fur as well. Not a patch, but lines. And our cat, on his forehead, had lines of fur that perfectly made the letter M. And so we had to name him with an M. Now, Mikey was taken, that was me. So he ended up being called Muffin. So I loved our cat Muffin. He was a big cat, and he had grown up with us since being a kitten, so he was a very, very happy cat. And his place of hanging out was this focal point in the house, right at the entrance to the kitchen, the stairs up and the stairs down. And he would lie there, sleep there, sit there, make the cat loaf there. If you know cats, you know what a cat loaf is. And it was my practice, just for fun, just because when you're a kid you do these things, I would get on the lower steps, get on my knees such that my head and shoulders were above the floor, and I would, if the cat was there, I would just pet the cat. And he had an engine that purred like nobody's engine, and you could scratch under his neck and scratch behind his ears and just pet the full size of him if he was curled up in this position. And I don't know what it was, but just being, even now as an adult, if I don't have a cat, but if I see a cat and I think about just killing some time, petting the cat, listen to it purr, scratch behind its ears, scratch under its chin, and that was what kids do, and I would do that many, many, many times. So that was a position in the house I was very comfortable with. So somehow on the night of the 24th, I was looking for the cat. Now, I don't know why. I think because it was the 24th of December, Christmas Eve. I probably couldn't sleep, or if I was sleeping, I woke up. Let's say it might have been 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I decided to look for the cat. Now, the thing is, we had a rule in our house that you couldn't come down to the living room until the morning of Christmas Day when you got the call. Basically, the parents would say, okay, come down. So this area was off limits from the point you went to bed, let's say 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve, until the morning when you got the call. So this was off limits. So I was aware of this, but somehow I found myself not in my room upstairs, but down. Maybe I went into the basement looking for the cat. I don't know. But I got to this, from the lower level to the main floor, those steps that I used to kneel on. And so I got there, and I thought the cat might be there, but it wasn't. So I got on the steps and peeked over the floor, just my head, just because I didn't know if my parents were still awake or whatever. But I peeked over the floor, and the scene I saw was magic. It was the living room. The tree was always kept alit overnight, never turned off the lights on the tree. It was a nice big natural, either spruce or pine Christmas tree, and it always looked good with the lights on. But now it was completely surrounded by presents. Just figure a family with 6 kids, there was a lot of presents to go around. Even if it was just 3 or 4 presents a kid, that's a lot of presents. So the presents being wrapped in Christmas kind of wrapping paper, it was shiny, traditionally shiny, and so the light from the tree was multiplied by all the presents around the base of the tree. So this was absolutely a magical scene for me. Just the whole aura of the living room changed. It was just so bright, and I mean, I was there on my knees looking at this scene. It was really, if you know who Norman Rockwell was, he was an American painter who painted very folksy scenes with kids and families, and this was a Norman Rockwell moment for me. And I remember just staying there for a few minutes and staring at this scene, the scene of the tree. And it was wonderful, and I've never forgotten it. And it's just stayed with me. And when I watch A Charlie Brown Christmas, these memories come flooding back, and this is the main memory for me. Because the key about Christmas Eve for me was the anticipation. December was a month of anticipation. So there was excitement in the air, all the energy I mentioned, but there was always the anticipation of Christmas Day. But I found out pretty early on that the anticipation of the day and the actual day itself were not the same thing. And this is also addressed, hopefully in a comical way, if you see the cartoon, in A Charlie Brown Christmas. The notion that Christmas Day just doesn't fulfill what we think it's going to fulfill. So I learned pretty early on that the magical day was not Christmas Day, but Christmas Eve. So on this 24th, as I'm kneeling on those steps and looking at this scene from our living room, it was not only magical, but it reminded me, even as a kid, that this was the moment. This was the real moment of joy for a kid, and I've never lost that joy of the 24th of December. The 25th, nowadays as an adult you would say, would be anticlimactic. But the 24th was before presents were opened, was before the hustle and bustle of Christmas morning. It was so quiet in the middle of the night, but it was the room was so brightly lit with the lights off the tree and the presents. That anticipation and the joy of that moment has never left me. And even today, when I think of a big event like a championship hockey game or the first day on a job, I often say the magic moment isn't the game itself, it's before the game starts, or not the first day on the job. It's if you start on the Monday, it's the Friday or the Saturday before, and when you are just feeling so joyful that you got this new job or a job. It's always that moment that is magical for me, and not the actual game or the starting of the job. And that's how I felt that early morning on Christmas. And I never found the cat that night. So I don't know where Muffin was, but he wasn't anywhere to be found. So now I'm 10 years old. I love the Christmas season. I love the snow. I love the cold weather. I love the anticipation of the month. And now we find out that a very popular comic strip that I loved and was, I don't want to say reading because, you know, there were very few words. It was a comic strip, and in those days they were in newspapers. If anybody remembers what a newspaper is, comics were a big part of the newspaper. Many people, certainly kids, would get the newspaper where they read the comics, and I was a big fan of Charlie Brown. And then we heard, I guess through watching television, that there was going to be a cartoon version of this comic strip, and it was going to be a Christmas special called The Charlie Brown Christmas. Well, this was wonderful. I really liked the comic strip. It had been around for many, many years. By 1965, it was, without exaggeration, probably world famous. Charles Schulz, the creator of Charlie Brown and Company, had begun drawing this cartoon in 1950. By the end of the 50s, I think he was extremely well known, and into the 60s, he was a force. Not only for the main characters like Charlie Brown, but also Snoopy became a real cultural figure. And so he was really riding a wave, and I guess that's why somebody came to him and said, we should make a cartoon and put it on television. Now the concern was, would they screw it up? For people who love the comic strip, it was very simple. Schulz had a very economical style of drawing that really, really worked in that medium. But would they screw it up? Would they change it? Would it look so dramatically different? And also, we've been reading about all these characters, but we've never heard them say a word. And so I think for someone like myself, I wasn't worried, but I was looking forward to it. But what if they didn't do a good job with it? Well, the answer was they did a spectacular job with it. And it starts with the casting of the characters. First of all the show looked exactly like the comic strip. The characters were drawn by Schulz. Now, whether or not they had lots and lots of people doing the in-between stuff, there's a whole lot of scholarship about how cartoonists draw parts of a scene and then somebody else fills in the in-betweens. So don't worry about that. It was Charles Schulz's drawings, so the characters looked exactly the same as they did in the comic strip. That's good. And we had no idea what they were going to sound like, but one of the brilliant elements of this cartoon is that the voices, or the actors and actresses, who I believe were not even teenagers, they might have barely been teenagers, but they were young people, their voices were perfect. For me, they were perfect. I don't know if I ever imagined what Charlie Brown sounded like, but the Charlie Brown and the Charlie Brown Christmas, to me, sounded like Charlie Brown. Lucy sounded like Lucy. Linus sounded like a Linus would sound. It was inspired, I can only say. However it came about, however the casting director selected these kids to voice these parts, it just worked. So that was the first hurdle. The casting and the voices of A Charlie Brown Christmas, I think, are one of the reasons why it is still considered a very well done and popular cartoon to this day. Now the next one are these voices of these kids. Now the gimmick, and I want to say this very positively, the charming gimmick of the Charlie Brown comic strips is that 6-year-olds, and there might have been one 7-year-old and one 8-year-old, but mostly 6-year-olds spoke like adults, or they spoke on adult themes. So it wasn't pablum that they were spouting, it was really intelligent stuff coming out of their mouths. And this, of course, was not changed at all for the cartoon. They got these great voices of kids who, however old they were, they sounded like kids, but they weren't talking like kids. They were talking like adults. And so that was another plus, that the dialogue was just like it was in the comic strips. It was very elevated. It was talking about adult themes of, I don't want to say mental illness, let's say sadness, or the meaning of Christmas, or the commercialism of the Christmas season, what to expect on Christmas. The taste of snowflakes would have been a kid thing, but it was all done so well, and it just clicked. It just really, really worked. The next element was, as I watched this, was the setting. It was a small town. Now Charles Schulz, I believe, grew up in the Midwest, so he came from a small town. And the setting of A Charlie Brown Christmas is in a small town, completely snow-covered at this time of year. I don't know if the show takes place on Christmas Eve. It certainly doesn't take place on Christmas Day. So let's assume, for sake of argument, that it's Christmas Eve. So we have a snow-covered town, and almost throughout the entire cartoon of 25 minutes length, snow is falling, and they show this in the animation for most of it. And for me, watching this cartoon, it's like, that's my town. I grew up in a town exactly like that. That looks like where I am, with the mounds of snow beside the driveways and the sidewalks, with the snow falling, with Christmas lights on every house. So I could relate to the scene, and that helped. It wasn't Los Angeles, or even a cartoon taking place in New York with lots of skyscrapers and buildings and not really a whole lot of snow around. It was a small town, and that was Charles Schulz's experience, and that was my experience. So that was wonderful. The next element is the artwork of Charles Schulz. Now, as I said, he had a very economical style of drawing, and I've actually seen a couple of interviews, archival interviews with Charles Schulz. He's been dead a long time now. He was active for a great many years, and he started in 1950. And he talked about how he was very comfortable with his expertise in drawing as a cartoonist. He was very proud to be a cartoonist, he said, but he never took art lessons. He never went to an art studio. He would have been intimidated by the fact that somebody sitting next to him could draw 100 times better than he could. So he didn't, but he learned how to draw to his needs, which was as a cartoonist. And there's a huge school of cartoonists, a huge body, a brother and sisterhood of cartoonists that I think probably understand what Schulz was saying. And in fact, my childhood friend ended up being a cartoonist all his life, and I think they appreciate the economic styles, how you can find a uniqueness to your style, and how it can really sell a story. And so the artwork in A Charlie Brown Christmas is economic. It's imperfect. There's some broken people in it, or it doesn't quite work. And so that lack of sophistication and fanciness in the cartoon, I think, adds to its tone. And for me, it just works, again, perfectly. All of it's being used to tell story. And the story is, just like the comic strips, it's vignettes. So there's lots of little stories. There's, at the beginning, kids skating on a frozen pond. Well, I've skated on a frozen pond. They're playing a game on that pond. I played that game, and it's a very dangerous game, and I wouldn't be surprised if kids are restricted from doing it today if they're skating in an outdoor rink or a supervised facility. We called it Crack the Whip, and it was if you had 4 or 5 or 6 people in a row, they held hands and they started skating around the ice. And when you went around a curve, the last person in that line would be going a whole lot faster than the first person, because you would whip those people around to the point where eventually they would be let loose from the line and they would go flying. And I had done this as a kid in outdoor rinks or on the frozen pond, and here I am watching a Charlie Brown Christmas, and there it was, right there, the same Crack the Whip with kids on the frozen pond. So skating on the pond, throwing snowballs, making snowmen, and doing it in humorous ways. I think that the Charlie Brown comic strip was very funny, both for kids and adults to appreciate. Schulz had a very interesting way to look at the world, and he created characters to really tell the stories he wanted to tell. The hard done by Charlie Brown, the narcissistic Lucy, who thought she was the prettiest girl in the school, the crazy dog Snoopy, the philosopher, let's say, Linus, the musician Schroeder, the kid who was never quite clean, Pigpen. It just, Frida with her naturally curly hair. It just goes on and on and on. So it was wonderful. So there were little vignettes of storytelling, and they're funny, and they revolve around the activities of kids outdoors. But there's a main story, and that's Charlie isn't happy. Now, there's nothing new about that. Charlie was often an unhappy person trying to figure out what it meant to be happy, and that's kind of the spine of the story. Why isn't he happy? What has he got to do to be happy? What does Lucy do to try to help him to feel happy? And how the reactions of the other characters in the story, who are not fans of Charlie Brown, and in very comical ways let that be known. So that's the main story, along with the comic vignettes, and Snoopy plays a role as a comedic figure. Of course, not acting like a dog at all, even though he was a dog acting like a person. And that was, again, the charm of the comic strip, that Snoopy was much, much more than a dog. He was another means of telling a comedic story. And finally, another stroke of brilliance, which I don't know why as a 10-year-old, because I was 10 years old, that I thought it was just perfect, and that is the music for A Charlie Brown Christmas. Now, who'd have thunk that a Christmas cartoon featuring these 6-year-old kids in the Midwest of, let's say, the US, or a small town anywhere that's snow-covered, there would be jazz music. All the renditions of the Christmas songs would be done in a jazzy format with a group called the Vince Guaraldi Trio. And for me, it just is amazing how well this interpretation of these Christmas carols works in this cartoon. It's amazing. And to this day, whenever I hear Vince Guaraldi's music from A Charlie Brown Christmas, not only do I think of the cartoon, but I think of Christmas time, whether it's the song A Christmas Tree, or Hark the Herald Angels Sing, or the background music when the kids are skating on the frozen pond, or the background music when the kids are in the auditorium and they're dancing to Schroeder, who's playing this Vince Guaraldi music. It just works. And sometimes you can't explain why it does. Maybe it might have been if you had a completely different kind of music, even jazz music, but different interpretations, it wouldn't have worked at all. Or maybe if you had traditional Christmas carols, it wouldn't have worked at all. At the end of the cartoon, there is a traditional Christmas carol sung, but it just seems to fit the story. So who knows why, but it works, and everybody who likes this cartoon, I have to believe, knows the Vince Guaraldi Trio's music. And the only Vince Guaraldi Trio's music I've ever heard, and I have to assume they were a fairly successful trio, is the music they performed for A Charlie Brown Christmas. So I don't know if it was an accident. I don't know if somebody was inspired, whoever it was, whether it was Schulz or the director of the cartoon or somebody else said, you know what would really work is if we had these guys, I've heard them play, and they do some Christmas versions of, Christmassy versions of some jazz stuff. But they did, and it just works. And I think it elevates the cartoon to a higher level. And as I've often said in this series, there are often little things that elevate storytelling to the next level. As I talk about movies, that a really good story becomes a terrific story because of one little thing that is added to it. Could be music, could be other things, But in this case, I believe the music of A Charlie Brown Christmas elevates this terrific cartoon to an even higher plane. And it's just unbelievable, really. I find it unbelievable how successful this match was between Christmas music and soft jazz music. But with that in mind, I have a routine for A Charlie Brown Christmas for watching this show. So if I saw it for the first time like everybody else did in 1965, for the next 10 years, or let's say maybe even 12 years, you could only see it once a year. There's no streaming, of course, but there was also no video cassettes or DVDs to watch A Charlie Brown Christmas on. You watched it when the network aired it on broadcast television once a year, always in December, and usually around the third week of December. So you would watch Charlie Brown, A Charlie Brown Christmas, once a year. And I did that religiously for 10, 12 years until finally you could get it on a VHS cassette, which I did, and a DVD, which I did, and then I could watch it whenever I wanted. But the funny thing is, I didn't want to watch it at any other time except in December. So I've never watched A Charlie Brown Christmas except in December. I tried a couple of times. I said, this doesn't feel right. There's no snow on the ground. When I watch A Charlie Brown Christmas, I want to watch it and look out the window and see snow falling or see snow on the ground. And the same is true for the music. I only want to listen to Vince Guaraldi Trio's Charlie Brown music in December. So I never listen to that music any other time of the year, and I have all the songs on my smartphone. I only listen to it in December. Now I can listen to it in Jan and Feb too, because it's cold, it's still winter, and I don't mind that. But definitely not the cartoon. I do not watch A Charlie Brown's Christmas at any other time in the year except for December. And again, that was because it started out that way. I couldn't watch it at any time except in December, because for 12 years, the only time you could see it was when the networks aired it. And they aired it religiously year in and year out because it was that successful. But today, I can watch it whenever I want. And it is December. It is the day after my favorite day of the year, December 24th. But I don't mind settling back, getting nice and warm, maybe having a cup of hot chocolate, and watching A Charlie Brown Christmas yet again from the 22nd row.